Welcome to Madison City Channel's Know Your Candidates interviews, co-sponsored by the League of Women Voters of Dane County. I'm your interviewer, Andrea Kaminsky, and I'd like to introduce Nino Amato, who is running for Alder in District 19. As we begin, Nino Amato, please give an opening statement about the educational, vocational, and civic experience that you have, which prepares you for this office, and why you're running for Alder.
Sure. Well, I'm a product of the Madison school system. So are my daughters. I'm actually the second generation, they're third. Did my undergraduate graduate work at UW-Madison. Later on, served on the UW Board of Regents. Later became president of the technical college system. So you can see that I have a very strong interest in both education because that's the root of all public policy. The reason I'm running is it goes back to actually 2005, Andrea, when you had me as your main speaker at your annual meeting on climate change, and it was shortly after the Hurricane Katrina. And since then, I've been actively involved in environmental issues. And when you look back in 2005, Madison was one of the cities where council members and the mayor listened to neighborhood groups, listened to citizens' concerns. But the reason I'm running is in the last 5 years, it has flipped in the opposite way. Residents aren't being heard. They're being ignored. And what you have is a situation where special interest groups are overriding the concerns of neighborhoods on environmental issues. We've seen it where bike lobby groups have come in to take down tree canopies when the neighbors didn't want it, or removal of 4,000 trees in the greenway at Saw Creek that affects Wexford Village, which is in the 19th district, and nobody wants it. So the reason I'm running is that it's time to bring Madison back to who it was, start listening to the residents and the neighborhood concerns, and put a greater emphasis on environment versus listening to special interest groups.
All right, thank you for that. How would you evaluate the city's current efforts to address homelessness and increase the amount of affordable housing? Are there additional steps the city should take to address these issues?
Well, I think from a standpoint of initiative, they get a good grade. But on the implementation, they get a terrible grade. We've seen several of the projects from Housing One deteriorate badly, poor management on the part of who they hire. And here in the west side, that impacts the 19th district on Tree Lane, they had to close the facility. It became a public nuisance. So the city needs to focus more on what do we do when we build the project and how do we manage it to provide all the necessary resources to make it work. We have failed to do that. And I think I bring the experience, and the experience comes from my senior executive position at WPL Holdings, where we built one of the first affordable housing projects on East Washington Avenue for veterans. And we used our housing credits to build that in cooperation with the city. So I have background and experience that can look at not just throwing money at a problem, but can actually follow it through and make it work.
Thank you. What actions or programs would you support to enhance public safety in Madison? And in particular, what's your position on the use of body cameras by Madison police officers given the recent demonstration project?
Well, that's a very timely question because in today's Wisconsin State Journal, our former police chief, who's now on his way to Seattle, Washington, made a number of excellent comments. He really did a great job during his 5 years here. He used data-driven policing, so he made decisions where it's effective in dealing with violent crimes as well as burglaries and break-ins. And he's been a strong advocate of body cameras. We are the only municipality in Dane County who don't have body cameras. If you look even within the state, we are at the bottom of the list. Now, I know this all stems from the Tony Robinson tragedy, but had that police officer had a body camera on, we would have had a better perspective and maybe the outcome would have been different. Body cameras are to protect the person who may in fact be accused of something or falsely accused. At the same time, it provides the behavior that's needed by our public officials. And lastly, the experiment that went on has been very successful. But this debate's been going on since 2014, and you have an ideological extreme who basically wants to defund the police, and they don't want to go with body cameras. Hopefully, this will now pass in the 2026 budget. All the more reason to elect candidates who are running who are going to support that effort. And the other thing with public safety is traffic control. We had over 72 traffic fatalities in the city of Madison. I'm all in favor of lowering the speed limits, but unless you have enforcement of speed limits, it's not going to happen. And the data shows that from a number of studies at the University of Minnesota. And lastly, let me add this. What people don't realize, we have 5 traffic officers in the city of Madison for the last 10 years that only work from 6 in the morning to 2 in the afternoon. We have no coverage during the traffic hours, no coverage in the evening, and questionable coverage in the afternoon. So we need to uptick traffic enforcement, along with the fact too of providing, I think it's a question of time, what I call going back and have conversations with the school board in light of the shooting that took place earlier this year about putting SROs back into schools. I think that's really important.
Okay. In the wake of the recent referendum to increase property taxes, what are your priorities for the city budget?
Well, let me just add, several former mayors, a number of former alders like myself, told the city, you're overtaxing. There is no need to have to raise in a referendum $22 million. The mayor went ahead and did a budget which talked about if we don't get the $22 million, they're going to have to close some of the libraries. They're going to have to cut out crossing guards. They're going to have to cut police department. And I, quite frankly, opposed that referendum. And lo and behold, it passes barely. And within 3 weeks after the referendum passes, the city announces they have over a $20 million surplus. Okay. So to me, we need greater transparency, greater accountability, and we need measurements to determine what programs are working and what programs are not. What we do is the budget come in and they layer service upon service upon service without knowing whether or not they're effective. So it's not any one program. We have a system problem. And we need to develop a better transparent system so that residents have input as where they want their money spent. And when I say that, it's not just taxpayers, it's renters who also pay indirectly property taxes. So it's really important to revise the way we create budgets, go to what I would call either a zero-based budgeting or a cost accounting budgeting, and have measurements in place and really peel back the, quote, financial onion to find out what's true and what's not.
Okay. How should Madison balance the need for development with other concerns such as traffic, historic preservation, or conservation of natural areas?
Well, I'm a big fan of historic preservation. As you may know, I grew up in South Madison in a community called the Green Bush, the Triangle. It was one of the most culturally diverse communities that had a synagogue, pharmacies, Catholic Church, Baptist Church, Methodist Church, local businesses. And the city came in and we fell victim to, quote, the terrible undermining of urban renewal. So we could have preserved that historically, and we didn't. So we need to put a greater emphasis and we need to appoint people who embrace historical values. Right now, we have people who are embracing development values and simply building and tearing down residential properties to put up 10-story buildings is not historical preservation. In fact, what people have to realize, when you put people in 10-story apartment buildings, and the police chief can verify this, there is more friction, there is more domestic calls to deal with problems when you have people that close together. So one, political appointees, which the council must approve. And secondly, we need to change our value system and really look at historical preservation. State Street is becoming deteriorated, and we need to preserve State Street because that's the lifeblood between the university, the state capitol, and the center of the city.
Okay. What are the most critical issues that you see facing the people in your own district, and what would you propose to address these?
I think the biggest issue is you might recall when Christine Slack won the council seat 2 years ago. She won on the campaign of accountability, transparency, and listening to residents. And then she had to step aside for family reasons, and understandably so. And her replacement was a political appointee that the mayor endorsed. He doesn't listen to the residents. And some of the other council members don't listen to the residents. They listen to special interest groups. And I'm hearing all over the city that it's time that alders represent the interest of the residents, the renters, and the neighborhood groups relative to environmental issues, and not bend to the political pressures of savvy lobbyists who right now, unfortunately, are dominating Madison politics.
All right, thank you. What else would you like to say to the viewing audience as we complete this interview?
Well, I've lived in the West Side. In fact, I was one of 7 homes first built in Wexford Village, which is the 19th district. Um, I love this city, and a lot of people do. And those who just came here love this city too. But we're at a crossroads. And unless we can start electing city council members who truly want to represent the concerns of the residents and the neighborhoods on environmental issues, Madison's going to go down a wrong path with a lot of unintended consequences. We have major issues facing the city, from housing crisis to affordability to environmental to public transportation. And it's time to kind of bring common sense and empathy back to the city council and have a broader perspective with some fiscal responsibility. And I will do just that. I have a long track record of accomplishments, and I hope that people vote for alders who are willing to do the same.
All right. Well, I want to thank Nino Amato for speaking with us, and thank the viewing audience for taking the time to know your candidates. I want to remind everyone that the general election is Tuesday, April 1st. Every election is important. So please vote. And on behalf of Madison City Channel and the League of Women Voters of Dane County, I thank you for joining us.